Hello, this is Ian Stewart, and welcome to the People of Earth podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the People of Earth podcast. In this episode, we're continuing our series of interviews with the various members of People of Earth. In this particular episode, we're actually going to be interviewing me, or rather, Gabriel Globos will be interviewing me. And this actually was not my idea. I really wasn't planning on doing this, but Gabriel, being the leader of People of Earth, insisted on it. Anyway, I'm not going to say too much about it because I think, for one, you're going to be hearing my voice enough on this podcast episode. So without further ado, here is Gabriel's interview with myself, Ian Stewart.
Welcome to the People of Earth podcast. Sitting down with our incredible bass player, Ian Stewart. Pick his brain a little bit about his upbringing, about his involvement in People of Earth, and whatever he wants to share with us. So, Ian, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about what you do, what your instrument, and give us a little background.
Well, I play bass. I play bass at People of Earth, obviously. And I've been playing bass for, I don't even know how long now. Like 20 years, I guess. Just
You old.
Yeah, I know. It's like when you've been doing something and now it's getting into the double digits and stuff like that. That's when you know you're far gone, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm a freelance bass player in New York, and I play with Cembo Corniel's quintet. I play with Gerardo Contino at the moment, and kind of Ola Fresca, and the list goes on of other bands that I play with less frequently, such as Los Hacheros here and there, and other salsa, Cuban, and Latin jazz groups. So, and but the journey to that point has been a very long and interesting trip.
Did you start off playing upright or playing electric?
Initially electric. I actually started on guitar for barely enough time to even learn the guitar. I mean, just a few months, and I always wanted to be a bass player. So I eventually, my parents finally surrendered to the fact that I wanted to play bass and got me a bass, and thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen or thought about, and immediately decided that I wanted to do it for a living. Which kind of strange for a 12-year-old to do, but and I took up upright, I think, in my sophomore year in high school. And
like high school band kind of thing.
I did, yeah, but my high school, I'm from Syracuse, New York, and the school I went to didn't really have a lot of music. It had some. Actually, had a really important music teacher, like general music teacher, and I kind of by the time I was in my junior year, I was actually playing for the Syracuse University jazz ensemble, jazz big band, and also studying on the weekends at Eastman. So I would go drive to Rochester on Saturdays, I think, or was it Sundays? I don't remember, and to take classes over there in their CED department. And then after that, also at that time, actually, I was there was still a pretty good gigging scene in Syracuse, and I did that,
in high school.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for some reason back then, like, your parents could vouch for you at a bar, so my parents would just take me out to these venues on a school night that I was like definitely way too young to get into, and I played with the older jazz musicians in town, and I actually had a lot of professional experience before I went to college, which I think was a really good thing. And And then I went to SUNY Purchase which was a decision that surprised even me because I really wanted to go to Eastman really bad. Because I also was a classical bassist too, and they make you do both at Eastman, which I thought was a really good idea. And I actually got into Eastman, but for some reason, I don't know. It was just one of those.
Financially?
No. Actually, I had enough of a scholarship at Eastman where they kind of were the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what prompted me to go to Purchase. I think Todd Kuhlman did a really good job of selling it to me or something, and I did it, and it was well, kind of like what we talked about with you. It was an interesting, confusing time of trying to figure out what to do with myself because I was a very curious student. I was kind of one of those learn at all costs kind of individuals. I've always been that way. I've always been very kind of obsessive about, things that I get curious about.
Entomology.
Like entomology. Yes, I was an entomology wunderkind when I was a very small kid before music. That was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But yeah, I wanted to explore all the things that were at Purchase that I feel like I would have had access to if I had gone to Eastman. So basically, the entire time, I basically went through SUNY Purchase, feeling like I had went to the wrong school, felt like kind of an odd duck there, so to speak, because everybody there was really focused on jazz, and I was really focused on just learning as much about music in general as I could, because I didn't want to just be a jazz musician. I never just wanted to be a jazz musician. I just wanted to be the best musician I could be. And I wanted to find as much of an all-encompassing way of doing that as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not a program that was made for that.
Right.
So I actually did, I created a lot of my own opportunities there. Well, actually, I should backtrack a little bit. When I was a freshman, one of the most important things that happened to me, besides getting tendonitis for the first time and sinking into a deep hole of depression for a while, I actually met Panagiotis Andreu because he was a grad student. He was a second-year grad student at Purchase.
What was he doing there?
Getting his master's degree.
In electric bass.
And yeah, they somehow let him in because that was something they never did. They never let him in.
He was older than grad student age, or he was much older than us.
I think he's in his late 30s now. So yeah, something like that. But yeah, it felt to me like he was significantly older at the time. But he, I just remember seeing him, and I was really just into doing upright bass at the time, and doing all that kind of stuff. And it's when I saw him, I just had never seen anything quite like that before. I mean, there's nothing like Panagiotis Andreu. I mean, that guy's like easily one of the most original electric bass players of his generation. But it was really his whole affinity for world music, timba included.
Yeah.
But also the music of the Balkans, and all that kind of stuff, and how he kind of molded it all together into his own unique take on it. It astounded me. I mean, I feel like it changed me forever because I would go see him play with Maya Trio in Alphabet City that eventually became New York Gypsy All Stars, and his recitals where he did all these he did jazz standards and all these crazy Balkan meters and I actually wasn't that interested in timba at the time. I didn't know much about it. I liked Afro-Cuban music a lot, or at least what I thought was what I perceived, my limited perception of what that was at the time. But also, for the most part, I just felt alienated and alone for the most part at Purchase. I didn't really form the kind of bonds there that I feel like a lot of musicians do, or at least I didn't take advantage of them the way that a lot of people do. It wasn't like I graduated and my graduating class was my circle after that.
Right.
It really didn't happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people were my friends, but I I needed to get out of New York, and it was 2008, so it was not a good time to be here to begin with as a musician. I think a lot of people, have talked about that, during the whole crisis and everything. It was not a good gigging time, and I really wanted to go somewhere where I could really develop as a performer, and it just so happened that a friend of mine from Syracuse, a vibraphonist named Preyas Roy, invited me out to play in Chicago in 2009. This was after I did a little bit of cruise shipping, to save up some money. And I was actually going to move back to New York, but he invited me out for a couple weeks in Chicago. And I went out there and met Darwin Nagara. Like my second week, he asked me if we played at a jam session. And Darwin doesn't really go into a lot of jam sessions, but he was there that night. It was at the Velvet Lounge, back when the Velvet Lounge was still when the big jam session was still happening at Velvet Lounge on Sundays. And after we played together, he asked for my card and said, "Man, I loved playing with you. Do you play Latin jazz and salsa and stuff like that?" And I lied and said yes. My teachers told me, like, when you're starting out, just say yes to everything. It doesn't matter what it is. The answer is always yes, because you never know where it's going to take you. And sure enough, a couple days later, I got a text from him asking me to play with, the Chicago Afro-Latin Jazz Ensemble at Andy's. It was actually with his quintet, the quintet version of it, not the big band. It was the Darwin Nagara Evolution Quintet, but they're all kind of the same thing, it's like his People of Earth,
Mm-hmm.
like it was his collective that he ran with Victor Garcia, who's a really amazing trumpet player in Chicago. And here I am, like I'd never really played any Afro-Cuban music outside of my college big band. Here I am playing like charts like, Michel Camilo's Sweet Sandrine, part 3 and stuff like that, and all this like incredibly hard music. And I remember I didn't sleep at all the day before, and I just shedded it all. But still, like a lot of the subtleties of the style were still very hard for me, as you would expect,
Mm-hmm.
And I went through all the hazing experiences of
Mm-hmm.
playing, that kind of music, which I still go through quite a bit, and it was all embarrassing and terrifying and all those kind of things. I mean, there's too many stories to list, but it was the trial by fire, the slow, grueling process of playing various salsa gigs and Latin jazz gigs in Chicago, and just getting my ass kicked and turning the beat around a million times until I learned not to do it so
Mm-hmm.
much anymore. But kind of 2 years into being into living in Chicago, I got picked up by this one fusion band called Marbin, who are a Moon June recording artists. It's Danny Rabin and Danny Markovich, two guys from Israel that have a very, very, very good, very unique fusion band. And one of the unique things about them is that we toured all over Middle America, playing in like these like nowheresville bars in like Southern Illinois, Arkansas, Missouri, and before I knew it, I was playing like 300 dates a year with them. And we eventually opened up for Scott Henderson for a while, and Alan Holdsworth for a while. And that was pretty eye-opening. I mean, it was I had never experienced playing with a single band that much before, and for the first time, I really developed a sense of what playing tight really is. When a band has played that many hours together, 300 dates a year for 2 years with sometimes 4 set gigs, whether anyone's listening or not. And we were so loud, of course, they couldn't help but listen to us. But with really amazing musicians. I mean, I was probably the weakest one out of all of them, and I really developed. For the first time, I really developed a very concrete sense of how to play in time, which was something I struggled with for a while. and that really changed. Also, my approach to bass tone, I feel like that really developed too. How to really play with a gigantic sound and play under a band
When
sonically.
did you switch to focusing more on electric when you moved to Chicago? As a
No.
result of, or you had already switched over? More?
No, that was another alienating aspect of college. I decided to switch for. I decided to switch mainly to electric about halfway through college.
Because of Panagiotis?
No, actually, it was I I I kept getting injured on upright bass, and it just took all the fun out of the instrument. I was a very very technically accomplished double bassist, you know, and but I struggled with a lot of I've struggled with stress management, especially when I was in my early 20s, and it just wreaked havoc on me physically. And but electric bass never aggravated me in that way, so it's a technically easier instrument to play, and it also was my first instrument, so I just didn't feel as limited by it. When I kind of rediscovered the electric bass, I just kind of felt like I enjoyed music again for the first time. It was a really liberating experience, and it was also kind of a painful experience too, because I knew that it was time for me to just put down the upright,
Yeah.
And I basically made that decision, and I haven't really looked back since. And it was, but a lot of professors that I had at Purchase, I know some of them were very supportive of it. Some of them really weren't. It's not one of those schools where, again, Panagiotis was an exception. You're not really supposed to be, it's not a degree in electric bass. It's a degree in double bass. So it was a tough struggle.
Did you play your senior recital on electric?
Both, but mostly electric bass, and it was actually mostly my own compositions at the time.
I didn't know you wrote music.
I do, yeah. I haven't done it in a while, but I
Yeah.
used to do it a lot. But at the time I was really into like a lot of Balkan music, music from Bulgaria, music from Turkey, all that like odd meter stuff, because of Panagiotis. And I really wanted to learn a lot about that kind of stuff. So I wrote my own original music in that. And that was a really cool time. I mean, it really got me out of kind of a emotional slump while I was at school. But after school, I stopped writing so much because I got really into Latin music, and it became more about the research and playing the music as well as I could. And the timba thing came after I quit Marvin in 2012. I quit the group because it was just financially unsustainable at that point, and which was a shame. I really loved it. I went through a lot of frustration in that group, because it wasn't really my band, but I improved so much as a player, and loved the music that they write so much, that it was hard to walk away from, but I had to. I was running out of money, and I wasn't gonna, basically ask my parents to pay me so I could stay on the road indefinitely. It just didn't make sense to me. So I stopped doing that, and when I came back to Chicago, I started playing with more Latin bands again. Some Brazilian groups too, and I met a composer arranger who lives in Chicago. He's from Camagüey. His name is Hector Silveira, and he was the one that, he had at least the closest thing to a timba band in Chicago. It's timba influence, but has a heavy like Latin jazz influence too. So it was like more of like a, Latin jazz version of N.A. La Banda with vocals. But there's not a lot of people in Chicago that really know how to play timba. So, but it was the closest thing I could get to. And but he gave me, and this is probably the most important thing, is that he gave me all the recordings to check out. Bamboleo, especially the first 3 albums.
You transcribed everything, right?
Transcribed everything.
Famously.
Yeah, which I still have to turn into a book at some point. I still have to do that. That was my initial book idea, you know. But anyway, to make a long story short, I made a decision that I was going to leave Chicago and kind of pursue, um, you know, Latin music in either L.A. or New York, and I hadn't decided yet. I was going to possibly go to Cal State LA for their Latin American Music Studies master's program or whatever. They have a master's program in studying, Latin American music, and so I had an audition set up, and I had a visit to New York. I went to visit Darwin.
I think I met you on that visit.
I don't. No, you met me when I moved.
No, I met you before you moved.
I never. No, it was after I moved here, because I only went to one time once when I visited here.
And who was playing there?
It was Papote. Was singing. It was supposed to be Pedrito's group, but Papote was subbing, and it was Jair, it was Alvaro, and it was Ariadne. So, no, you weren't there, but it was. But I met John through Darwin. I met John Benitez through Darwin, and it's kind of a funny story. I probably have told you it, but it was just a Tuesday night at Terrace 7. It wasn't even the Sunday jam. There was nobody there. It was just a trio with Darwin and and the two Benitezes. Yeah, Francis and John. And they were just playing jazz. They were just, I was like one of two people sitting up at the mezzanine. And during the break, Darwin introduced me to John. And John and I got talking. John had spent all day in the studio, so he was super tired. He was just sitting on a stool at the bar. And he's like, hey, man, I'm beat. Do you want to just play a few tunes on the second set? And you can play my bass if you want. I actually happen to have my bass there. And I did. I went up and I played a few tunes. I read a couple of Francis's tunes. And we were playing on this vamp section, I remember. And it was kind of timba-ish. And I remember looking up into the audience and to see John Benitez dancing in the mezzanine. And I'm like, he had come upstairs, and I had the blinders on. I wasn't paying attention to the audience at all until I saw him. I mean, how could you miss that? He's dancing to me. You know what I mean? It was like the craziest thing. And, we finished the song and he comes up and gives me a big bear hug, practically smothers me. And we, ever since then, I followed him around to a few other gigs, to Gerardo's gig, and, stopped by his jam session. I actually covered for his jam session during my visit, for the first half of
classic.
The classic
and
classic Benitez thing. So, but, he said, man, if you move here, I'll recommend you for work. He said it very clearly like that. And I said, okay. I canceled my ticket to LA and did about a year's worth of cruise ship work to save up for money and moved to New York and met you and a lot of other people. And somehow it keeps working out, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's awesome. People like Benitez, those moments where Benitez, who same way with me, was so encouraging. A musician of that level who's encouraging you, and like I said, Miguel de Armas and other people, Kazel, whoever. When they tell you they believe in you, it's just parting of the rain clouds. You just feel like you're in the sun. And you can last on that for a while.
Yeah. I mean, I've had many experiences that I can relate to on that. And I'm really thankful for the fact that, so many really great and well-known musicians are so cool like that.
Yeah.
Because it does give you that extra, jolt of inspiration that kind of keeps you going, because Lord knows you need all you can get in this life that we've chosen. But, I mean, I don't really have anything to complain about per se. I kind of came here and somehow was able to kind of do exactly what I came here to do.
Yeah.
Probably because I'm very stubborn and just don't just don't look back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where that comes from, but I can't explain that one. But yeah, it's I look back on it and just kind of go, wow, like what was I thinking?
Do you want to skip forward a little bit to talk about maybe like either like your experience with playing Timba
Yeah.
here or playing with People of Earth or
I think I can put both of them into the same thing. I mean, really, when I started to get how to play Timba, because there were a couple of like really failed attempts at it. When I first moved here, I played with Gerardo Contino's group for a little while at Guantanamera when John quit, as he's done a few times.
yeah.
And it was just not. I was just not ready for it. I was not ready for it, and I was not ready for it in that sort of environment. I mean, they're going at a million.
It's a battle.
It's a battle. They're going at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and
they don't care if you know what's up or you don't.
Exactly.
They're not going to slow down.
Yeah, exactly. And that's their way of doing it. And I know that very well at this point. And that's their system of making music. And it was just not something that I did not have the neural pathways to compete with that at the time.
Yeah.
So what did happen though, which was very good, was when I met Danny Odria and started doing Salsondria, which I don't do at the moment, but I did it for a while. And that for me was the perfect place to learn it because he was just trying to get something together too.
Yeah, he's another amazing starter.
He is an amazing starter. He really is. He really is.
Shout out to Danny.
Shout out to Danny. Salsondria. So so it was a perfect thing for both of us because he needed somebody to kind of do some organizational stuff for him, writing charts, and it was my chance to transcribe, many, many really well-known Timba songs especially songs from the 90s, Van Van and Los Que Son Son and all that kind of stuff, Reve, and Isaac, all that kind of thing, and memorize those songs, and learn them in a very, very thorough manner. And then when Ivan and Kaisel started playing with him, that was when I started to really learn the protocol. Like when I really started to learn, the gears, the la ley de la timba, as they call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole procedure of playing in a timba rhythm section, once the verses are over.
Yeah.
And I started to get it because they were very clear about it.
Yep.
And they would stick to the same patterns.
Yep.
And it started to make sense because it takes repetition.
Yeah.
Even if you get it, even if you understand it conceptually, you have to do it enough times. You have to do it enough times correctly where it starts to become habit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did that for a while and really, really was happy about it. I was really content with what I was doing, and and I was also playing with Ola Fresca, which is not timba necessarily, but there's elements of it in there. I was doing, I do Chimbo Cornell's group, which again has elements of that in there. It's more, Cuban jazz, more like, mixing like rumba and stuff like that with jazz, but in a way that's more modern, not in like in a Fort Apache sort of way, a way that's more contemporary. So I had a lot of opportunities to use this stuff, and I was really concentrating it. I was performing it regularly. And then when the opportunity came again, where Gerardo came knocking, then it was I suddenly had the toolkit necessary.
Yeah.
And it was a lot looser. They improvise more. It's a much more unpredictable gig. Even though they play a lot of the same songs over and over again, they're not the same way each night.
Right.
Anything can happen, especially if Axel and Kaisel are playing. They can go so many places with one song, and I think what's enabled me to do well in that group is the fact that I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to let them direct me because they're so good at it. If I just do what they do, it sounds amazing.
Right.
So, that's it. And I've been able to, as a result, get such a thorough experience playing that music that I feel like a lot of outsiders don't really have a chance to do.
Yeah, like that's exactly the kind of experience like that has driven me to start People of Earth. It's like the thirst for that.
Yeah, yeah, I did get that, and I'm very happy for that. And it's funny because like it's kind of like they can't it's the thing they can't take away from you at the end of the day.
Right.
It's a part of you, and I now I'm trying to figure out what to do with all of it. I'm an author too, and I do seminars for scottspacalessons.com, and that's been a really interesting experience because having to communicate to that on an online seminar like to people is an entirely different experience. And
can you talk about how you're applying it in People of Earth?
Well, the nice part about People of Earth is that it's all based on something that I kind of know how to do, which is really, really cool. But it's what I like about it is that I have some input in it when I want to, versus just kind of following orders, which I like, and but also I feel like my experience enables me to understand where you and Victor are coming from as composers and arrangers. So I can add things. I don't have to just follow what's on the page, and contribute something on that level, which I really enjoy doing a lot. And obviously, if because it's obviously mostly very through composed music for the most part. But if you guys want to add something spur of the moment, I can, I'm a little more flexible maybe than some other people in the band, or if a different bass player was there. And that's cool, and I like that part. And I like the fact that, even though there are these like ornate, complicated arrangements, there's still so many places where they can go, and how I can contribute to that in many subtle ways is a very, very cool thing. And I'm glad that I had all this other experience beforehand, because I feel like I can enjoy it more on that level, if that makes sense.
Can you just briefly talk about what you're hoping the audience will experience with People of Earth?
Energy, joy. I mean, that's what this music does. I mean, it's funny, like the timba, I guess it's a supposedly a very complicated music, but what it actually does is not complicated at all. It's you're right. You've said it yourself. I mean, there's something about it that there doesn't have to be an explanation for it. It just kind of hits you in a certain way that very few music genres do. I mean, it tickles the same funny bone maybe in me that made me like metal as a kid.
Yeah.
That's
the same thing with me.
Yeah. It just it hits you upside of the head like an aluminum baseball bat. It's just makes you want I remember sometimes when I'm in my car and I put on like Pasaporte or something like that, I want to go break windows again, like when I was 12 years old. So yeah, and I'm just glad that for whatever reason I've fallen into that niche here, and at least there's somewhere where I can do it, because it's not a music that's omnipresent everywhere. So
well, man, thank you so much for starting this podcast.
Yeah,
the pods are
well, one of these days when we have more time, I think I'll talk about how this whole podcast kind of came to be.
Yes,
because that's a whole story unto itself. But yeah, until then.
So stay tuned for more People of Earth podcasts coming at you next week. More news, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, and you can find out more about me at ianstewartbass.com, and be sure to check out peopleoferthmusic.com for all news and updates on People of Earth.
That's right.
See ya.